Hello, good morning. Welcome to our midday prayer for October 25th, 2016. Today I'm going to be reading from 1 Kings chapter 20 through 22, which is the end of 1 Kings. Prayer, and so let's get to it. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Like an eagle teaching her young to fly, catching them safely on her spreading wings, the Lord kept Israel from falling. The Lord's name be praised. Okay, so just a recap of what we read over yesterday. We're in the during the time of Elijah and Elisha. Elijah was the first prophet, and he was very strong against Ahab, the king of Israel. Israel and Judah are two different countries at this point, in the north and the south. He was told by God, Elijah was told by God to go and crown a new king of Aram, to crown a new king of Israel, and then to anoint the next prophet, Elisha. Well, he not other kings because that was too hard apparently. And so he went and anointed Elisha, and Elisha has now started following him. So that's where we are. Listen for God's word to speak to you. King Ben-Hadad of Aram gathered all his army together. 32 kings were with him, along with horses and chariots. He marched against Samaria, laid siege to it, and attacked it. Then he sent messengers into the city to King Ahab of Israel and said to him, "Thus says Ben-Hadad, your silver and gold are mine, your fairest wives and children also are mine." The king of Israel answered, "As you say, my lord, O king, I am yours in all that I have." The messengers came again and said, "Thus says Ben-Hadad, I sent to you, saying, deliver to me your silver and gold, your wives and your children. Nevertheless, I will send my servants to you tomorrow about this time, and they shall search your house and the houses of your servants, and lay hands on whatever pleases them, and take it away." Then the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, "Look, now see how this man is seeking trouble, for he sent to me for my wives, my children, my silver, and my gold, and I did not refuse him." Then all the elders and all the people said to him, "Do not listen or consent." So he sent to the messengers of Ben-Hadad, "Tell my lord the king, all that you first demanded of your servant I will do, but this thing I cannot do." The messengers left and brought him word again. Ben-Hadad said to him and sent to him and said, "The gods do so to me and more also, if the dust of Samaria will provide a handful for each of the people who follow me." The king of Israel answered, "Tell him, one who puts on armor should not brag like one who takes it off." When Ben-Hadad heard this message, now he had been drinking with the kings in the booths, he said to his men, "Take your possessions," and they took their positions against the city. Then a certain prophet came to King Ahab of Israel and said, "Thus says Yahweh, have you seen all this great multitude? Look, I will give it into your hand today, and you shall know that I am Yahweh." Ahab said, "By whom?" He said, "Thus says the Lord, Yahweh, by your young men who serve the district governors." Then he said, "Who shall begin the battle?" Then he mustered the young men who served the district governors, 232. After them he mustered all the people of Israel, 7,000. They went out at noon while Ben-Hadad was drinking himself drunk in the booths. He and the 32 kings allied with him. The young men who served the district governors went out first. Ben-Hadad had sent out scouts, and they reported to him, "Men have come out of Samaria." He said, "If they have come out for peace, take them alive. If they have come out for war, take them alive." But these had already come out of the city, the young men who served the district governors, and the army that followed them. Each killed his man. The Arameans fled, and Israel pursued them. But King Ben-Hadad of Aram escaped on a horse with the cavalry. The king of Israel went out and attacked the horses and the chariots and defeated the Arameans with a great slaughter. Then the prophet approached the king of Israel and said to him, "Come, strengthen yourself and consider well what you have to do. For in the spring the king of Aram will come up against you." Sorry about that. The servants of the king of Aram said to him, "Their gods are gods of the hills, and so they were stronger than we. But let us fight against them on the plain, and surely we shall be stronger at that day. Also do this, remove the kings each from his post, and put commanders in place of them. And muster an army like the army that you have lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot. Then we will fight against them in the plain. Surely we shall be stronger than they." He heeded their voice and did so. In the spring, Ben-Hadad mustered the Arameans and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. After the Israelites had been mustered and provisioned, they went out to engage them. The people of Israel encamped opposite them like two little flocks of goats, while the Arameans filled the country. A man of God approached and said to the king of Israel, "Thus says Yahweh, because the Arameans have said, 'Yahweh is a God of the hills, but he is not a God of the valleys,' therefore I will give all the great multitude into your hand, and you shall know that I am Yahweh." They encamped opposite one another 7 days. Then on the seventh day the battle began, and the Israelites killed 100,000 Aramean foot soldiers in one day. The rest fled into the city of Aphek, and the wall fell on 27,000 men that were left. Ben-Hadad also fled and entered the city to hide. His servants said to him, "Look, we have heard that the kings of the house of Israel were merciful kings. Let us put sackcloth around our waists and ropes on our heads and go out to the king of Israel. Perhaps he will spare your life." Off around their waists, put ropes on their heads, and went to the king of Israel and said, "Your servant Ben-Hadad says, 'Please let me live.'" And he said, "Is he still alive? He is my brother." Now the men were watching for an omen. They quickly took it up from him and said, "Yes, Ben-Hadad is your brother." And he said, "Go and bring him." So Ben-Hadad came out to him, and he had him come up into the chariot. Ben-Hadad said to him, "I will restore the towns that my father took from your father, and you may establish bazaars for yourself in Damascus, as my father did in Samaria." The king of Israel responded, "I will let you go on those terms." So he made a treaty with him and let him go. At the command of Yahweh, a certain member of a company of prophets said to another, "Strike me." But the man refused to strike him. Then he said to him, "Because you have not obeyed the voice of Yahweh, as soon as you have left me, a lion will kill you." When he had left him, a lion met him and killed him. Then he found another man and said, "Strike me." So the man hit him, striking and wounding him. Then the prophet departed and waited for the king along the road, disguising himself with a bandage over his eyes. As the king passed by, he cried to the king and said, "Your servant went out into the thick of the battle." Then a soldier turned and brought a man to me and said, "Guard this man. If he is missing, your life shall be given for his life. or else you shall pay a talent of silver. While your servant was busy here and there, he was gone. The king of Israel said to him, so shall your judgment be. You yourself have decided it. And he quickly took the bandage away from his eyes. The king of Israel recognized him as one of the prophets. Then he said to him, thus says the Lord, because you have let the man go whom I have devoted to destruction, therefore your life shall be for his life, and your people for his people. The king of Israel set out towards home, resentful and sullen, and came to Samaria. Later, the following events took place. Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel, beside the palace of King Ahab of Samaria. And Ahab said to Naboth, give me your vineyard so that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it is near my house. I will give you a better vineyard for it, or if it seems good to you, I will give you its value in money. But Naboth said to Ahab, Yahweh forbid that I should give you my ancestral inheritance. Ahab went home resentful and sullen because of what Naboth the Jezreelite had said to him. For he had said, I will not give my ancestral inheritance. He lay down on his bed, turned away his face, and would not eat. His wife Jezebel came to him and said, why are you so deprived to eat? He said to her, because I have spoken to Naboth the Jezreelite and said to him, give me your vineyard for money, or else if you prefer, I will give it for it. But he answered, I will not give you my vineyard. His wife Jezebel said to him, do you now govern Israel? Get up, eat some food, and be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Ahab in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal. She sent the letters to the elders and the nobles who lived with Naboth in his city. She wrote in the letters, proclaim a fast and set Naboth at the head of the assembly. Seek 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them bring a charge against him, saying, you have cursed God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death. The men of his city, the elders and the nobles who lived in his city, did as Jezebel had sent word to them, just as it was written in the letters that she had sent to them. They proclaimed a fast. They seated Naboth at the head of the assembly. The 2 scoundrels came in and sat opposite him, and the scoundrels brought a charge against Naboth in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth cursed God and the king. So they took him outside of the city and they stoned him to death. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth has been stoned, he is dead. As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, go, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money, for Naboth is not alive, but is dead. As soon as Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, Ahab set out to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. Then the word of Yahweh came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, go down to meet King Ahab of Israel, who rules in Samaria. He is now in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone to take possession. You shall say to him, thus says Yahweh, have you killed and also taken possession? You shall say to him, thus says Yahweh, in the place where dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, dogs will lick up your blood. Ahab said to Elijah, have you found me, O my enemy? He answered, I have found you because you have sold yourself to do so. Ahab said to Elijah, have you found me, O my enemy? I have found you because you have sold yourself to do what is evil in the sight of Yahweh. I will bring disaster on you. I will consume you, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free in Israel. And I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. and like the house of Baasha, son of Ahijah, because you have provoked me to anger and have caused Israel to sin. Also concerning Jezebel, Yahweh said, the dogs shall eat Jezebel within the bounds of Jezreel. Anyone belonging to Ahab who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and anyone of his who dies in the open country, the birds of the air shall eat. Indeed, there was no one like Ahab, who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, urged on by his wife Jezebel. He acted most abominably in going after idols, as the Amorites had done, whom Yahweh drove out before the Israelites. When Ahab heard these words, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth over his bare flesh. He fasted, lay in the sackcloth, and went about dejectedly. Then the word of Yahweh came to Elijah the Tishbite. Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his days, but in his son's days I will bring the disaster on his house. For 3 years, Aram and Israel continued without war. But in the 3rd year, King Jehoshaphat of Judah came down to the king of Israel. The king of Israel said to his servants, do you know that Ramoth-Gilead belongs to us, yet we are doing nothing to take it out of the hand of the king of Aram? He said to Jehoshaphat, will you go with me to battle at Ramoth-Gilead? Jehoshaphat replied to the king of Israel, I am as you are. My people are your people. My horses are your horses. He also said to the king of Israel, inquire first for the word of Yahweh. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together and found about 400 of them, and said to them, shall I go to battle against Ramoth-Gilead, or shall I refrain? They said, go up, for Yahweh will give it into the hand of the king. But Jehoshaphat said, is there no other prophet of Yahweh here, of whom we may inquire? The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is still one other by whom we may inquire of Yahweh, Micaiah, son of Imlah. But I hate him, for he never prophesies anything favorable about me, but only disaster. Jehoshaphat said, let the king not say such a thing. Then the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, bring quickly Micaiah, son of Imlah. The king of Jehoshaphat of Judah were sitting in their thrones, arrayed in their robes, at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria. And all the prophets were prophesying before them. Zedekiah, son of Chenaniah, made for himself horns of iron. And he said, thus says Yahweh, with these you shall gore the Arameans until they are destroyed. All the prophets were prophesying the same and saying, go up to Ramoth-Gilead and triumph. Yahweh will give it into the hand of the king. The messenger who had gone to summon Micaiah said to him, look, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably. But Micaiah said, as Yahweh, whatever Yahweh says to me, that I will speak. When he had come to the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth-Gilead to battle, or shall we refrain? Go up and triumph. Yahweh will give it into the hand of the king. But the king, how many times must I make you swear to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of Yahweh? Then Micaiah said, I saw Israel scattered on the mountains like sheep that have no shepherd, and Yahweh said, these have no master. Let each one go home in peace. The king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, did I not tell you that he would not prophesy anything favorable about me, but only disaster? Then Micaiah said, "Therefore hear the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him, to the right and to the left of him. And Yahweh said, Who will entice Ahab, so that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead?" Then one said one thing, and another said another, until a spirit came forward and stood before Yahweh, saying, "I will entice him." "How?" Yahweh asked him. He replied, "I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets." Then Yahweh said, "You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do it. So you see, Yahweh has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets, and Yahweh has disaster for you." Then Zedekiah, son of Chenaanah, came up to Micaiah, slapped him on the cheek, and said, "Which way did you speak of Yahweh? Which way did the spirit of Yahweh pass from me to speak to you?" Micaiah replied, "You will find out on that day when you go in to hide in an inner chamber." The king of Israel then ordered, "Take Micaiah and return him to Ammon, the governor of the city, and to Joash and say, 'Thus says the king, put this fellow in prison and feed him on reduced rations of bread and water until I come in peace.'" Micaiah said, "If you return in peace, Yahweh has not spoken by me. Hear your peoples, you peoples, all of you." So the king of Israel and King Jehoshaphat of Judah went up to Ramoth Gilead. The king of Israel and said to Jehoshaphat, "I will disguise myself and go into the battle, but you wear your robes." So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had commanded the 32 captains of his chariots. Fight with no one, small or great, but only with the king of Israel." When the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, "It is surely the king of Israel." So they turned to fight against him. And Jehoshaphat cried out. When the captains of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel, they turned back from pursuing him. But a certain man drew his bow and unknowingly struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. And he said to the driver of his chariot, "Turn around and carry me out of the battle, for I am wounded." The battle grew hot that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot facing the Arameans until at evening he died. The blood from the wound had flowed into the bottom of the chariot. Then, about sunset, a shout went through the army, "Every man to his city and every man to his country," and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. They washed the chariot by the pool of Samaria. The dogs licked up its blood, and the prostitutes washed themselves in it, according to the word of Yahweh that had been spoken. Now the rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did, and the ivory house that he built, and all the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? So Ahab slept with his ancestors, and his son Ahaziah succeeded him. The son of Asa began to reign over Judah in the 4th year of King Ahab of Israel. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Shechili. He walked in all the way of his father Asa. He did not turn aside from it, doing what was right in the sight of Yahweh. Yet the high places were not taken away. He still sacrificed and offered incense in the high places. Jehoshaphat also made peace with the king of Israel. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat and his power that he showed and how he waged war, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? The remnants of the male temple prostitutes who were still in the land in the days of his father Asa, he exterminated. There was no king in Edom. A deputy was king. Jehoshaphat made ships of the Tarshish type to go to Ophir for gold. But they did not go, for the ships were wrecked at Ezion Geber. Then Ahaziah, son of Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, "Let my servants go with your servants in the ships." But Jehoshaphat was not willing. Jehoshaphat slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of his father David. Joram succeeded him. Ahaziah, son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel in Samaria in the 17th year of King Jehoshaphat of Judah. He reigned 2 years over Israel. He did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and walked in the way of his father and mother, and in the way of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin. He served Baal and worshipped him. He provoked Yahweh, the God of Israel, to anger, just as his father had done. These are the words of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So this is a lot of, this is not greatest hits. This is probably not stories that you're terribly familiar with, but some interesting things. God continues to try to show his glory and his power to Ahab, even though over and over he has rejected God's ways. And so multiple times he saves him miraculously from the Aramean armies, who should have, for all intents and purposes, have won. We have this really interesting thing. After the first battle, it was in the hill country. And so the Aramean advisors say, well, you know, when we fight them in the valleys, then we'll have the advantage because our gods are gods of the valleys. And again, we get this idea that in ancient battles, you don't go against armies, you go against gods. Whose gods are going to be there? So that's one of their major things to that they take into consideration. And God shows his power because of that. The prophet comes out and says, well, because they said they'll only win in the hills and they won't win in the valleys, I'm going to let you win in the valleys, just so that I am in control. Well, Ahab doesn't listen over and over again. He goes and tries to take Naboth, and his wife, Jezebel, who's just a terrible person, conspires to get him killed so that the king can take this land. Elijah pronounces this terrible curse on him. We see the beginning of it, Ahab's death, and we will see Jezebel's death after a little while. And this is the only time that Elijah shows up in these last couple of chapters. Then we have this joint campaign with Judah and Israel. They're coming together, and this really interesting story about prophecy. Jehoshaphat says, you know, we should inquire of Yahweh, because he is, we are told, a follower of Yahweh. He does listen to God as his father did, even though he has some faults in that sort of thing. But he wants to see if God is going to show up and let them win. And all of the prophets say, oh yes, you're going to win, everything's going to be fine. But somehow Ahab doesn't trust that, so he goes after this one prophet who he doesn't like because he always prophesies bad things. And it turns out that this prophet is the one who's actually listening to God. And God apparently sent this other spirit, this deceitful spirit, Ahab into going into this battle. Well, Ahab goes into the battle anyways and thinks he's outsmarted God by dressing up in a regular uniform instead of his kingly attire. But by happenstance, he is killed by a random arrow that flies. And so he does die even though they win the battle. And oh yeah, and then we have this really interesting thing after Nahab. Naboth, I'm sorry. After Naboth's vineyard and all of that, Ahab repents. He puts on sackcloth. He grieves his sin, and God sees it. And he says to Elijah, who probably didn't want to hear it, hey, do you see Ahab? He's grieving the things that he's done. So I'm not going to give him this curse now. I'm going to let him die a natural death at this time, even though he kind of orchestrates that to happen. But the bad things are going to happen to his children instead of him himself, which is kind of interesting. We have this always second chance, even for Ahab, who's one of the worst kings ever. Then we have a little bit of information about Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, and Ahaziah, the next king over Israel. Another minor thing that I just noticed, as it always sticks out to me, is when there's a joint campaign, the king of Judah, which is in the south, goes down to Ahab in Samaria, which is north, which is usually not the way that we talk about it. North is usually up, south is usually down. For them, they actually oriented things where the east was up and the west was down. But it actually is not because of that. It's because he's going down from Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is up on a hill. And because it's also kind of the peak of everything, religiously and culturally and politically. They always talk about going, if you're going to Jerusalem, you're going up to Jerusalem. If you're going away from Jerusalem, you're going down. I don't know if anyone is going to be interested in that other than me, but there it is in text. So that's what we have. Tomorrow, at some point, we'll start 2 Kings. So pay attention to when that comes out. And I appreciate you sticking with me, even though there were some disruptions. Let's gather in prayer. To you, O Lord, I lift my soul. O God, in you I trust. Let us pray. Eternal God, we rejoice this morning in the gift of life, which we have received by your grace and the new life that you give in Jesus Christ. Especially we thank you for the love of our families. The affection of our friends. Strength and abilities to serve your purpose today. This community in which we live. Opportunities to give as we have received. God of grace, we offer our prayers for the needs of others and commit ourselves to serve them even as we have been served in Jesus Christ. Especially we pray for those closest to us, families, friends, neighbors. Refugees and homeless men, women, and children. The outcast and persecuted. Those from whom we are estranged. The church in Africa. O God, you are the wellspring of life. Pour into our hearts the living water of your grace, that we may be refreshed to live this day in joy. confident of your presence and empowered by your peace in Jesus Christ, our Lord. Now we continue to pray using the words that lead us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven,